控制鍵嘅地球圖案，之後選擇中文 Chinese，你就可以收聽到廣東話嘅翻譯。如果你需要廣東話嘅翻譯，請舉手，讓我哋知道有人需要廣東話嘅翻譯。多謝。Can this announcement stand?
Thank you. Just a second. Okay, well, thank you and welcome everybody. My name is Sam Davis. I'm on the Oakland School Board for North Oakland for District 1. And I'm also a parent here. I have a senior who will be graduating in 3 months and 8 days. So I'm very excited. not who's counting. Just really excited to have the candidates here. The county supervisor is a very important and powerful position. The county has tremendous resources at its disposal. That doesn't mean it's an easy job. It actually is a very difficult job. And these kinds of changes in our supervisors don't happen very often. Supervisor Carson, who is retiring, just announced his retirement, has served in that position for 30 years. So it's a very important moment in this area. This is District 5 that we're in. And so we're very grateful to the candidates. We know it's not easy it's not an easy job and it's not easy to run for public office. So we really thank you for your work. I also want to thank our co-hosts, which is Cos Reed Group, Isaac Cos Reed, the Rockridge Community Planning Council, and of course, the student varsity debate team here at Oakland Tech that's did so much to organize this. So we're really grateful to them. Brilliant young people who I'm sure will be running for one of these seats one of these days soon. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Isaac to welcome us as well.
Thank you, Sam. It's my honor to be the fiscal sponsor tonight. My name is Isaac Cos Reed. I have a small public affairs firm based in Oakland, working with organizations across the East Bay in the state of California. And when Sam asked me to sponsor tonight, I was quick to say yes, out of respect for him, for Casey Farmer and the Rockridge community, also the tech community, which is one of the most invested in our community of Oakland. I live over on the lake. I've been there for about 20 years, have kids in both our district and charter public schools, and I'm just a big champion of everything we're trying to do in this city to make it better. And also, out of respect for some of the amazing candidates that you see before you tonight, these are some of the most dedicated elected officials in our region, and it's very exciting that we have them running for this very critical seat. The county budget is $4 billion a year. So yes, they do have a lot of resources to invest in our community. So hopefully you get something out of tonight. And with that, I'll pass it over to Casey.
Thank you everyone for being here. I've lost my voice, so I'm glad I'm not leading tonight's forum. We'll have the young people step up shortly. I am chair of the Rockridge Community Planning Council. We distribute the Rockridge News. We focus on land use, transportation, and quality of life programs. And we are thrilled to be bringing the candidates to you this evening on Zoom and in person. And we look forward to their responses to these very thoughtful questions put together by themes proposed by the community and the young people. So thank you so much for being here. If you're here in the room, please enjoy the hot chocolate bar in the back and we'll get started. So young folks, come on up.
Okay, hi, I'm Rowan.
I'm Steven.
I'm Eric.
Good evening. We have a great crowd tonight here at Oakland Tech Student Center and at home via Zoom. Thank you all for attending and participating in democracy and for doing your homework on this important election for Alameda County Board of Supervisors.
In order for everyone to hear the candidates' responses, please keep your applause until the completion of the responses, as the candidates have limited time to respond to each question. And today we have 7 of 8 candidates in attendance. Nikki Fortunato Boss, John Bowders, Ben Bartlett, Ken Barrick, Greg Hodge, Chris Moore, and Laurel Plimier.
Each candidate will have exactly 90 seconds to answer each question in alphabetical order. The speaker order each candidate will have exactly 90 seconds to answer each question, and the speaker order will change for each question in alphabetical order. So the first question will start with Boss, and the second question will start with Bowders, and so on.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Mia Tran. I'm a senior here at Oakland Tech. I'm also the co-captain of the Oakland Tech debate team. My question for you is, could you introduce yourself and let the public know what unique factors about you makes you the best option to fulfill the role of County Supervisor for District 5? And we'll start with Nikki Bass.
Perfect. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's really great to be here. My name is Nikki Fortunato Bass. I am the president of the Oakland City Council and running for the County Board of Supervisors. I'm a 25-year resident of the county. I am a mother to a teenage daughter, a lifelong organizer, and an effective legislator that gets things done in partnership with our community. I was raised by Filipino immigrant parents who taught me the values of justice and being persistent in the pursuit of fairness. And I got recruited to run for office many years ago. I am really proud that I have been centering my time in office, really partnering with our community with the values I have of transparency, accountability, and equity. I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish. That has meant working with tenants to pass the strongest COVID eviction moratorium in the entire state, working with affordable housing developers to raise $350 million for up to 2,400 homes, working with students to make sure that we continue the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth. That's providing $19 million a year in programs to help support community schools, as well as working with community safety advocates for crisis response. As council president, I've been leading our budget process. Our budget is $4.2 billion, a significant budget. And as I said, I'm a coalition builder, a legislator, an organizer, a champion for working families. I'm really proud to be endorsed by Senator Nancy Skinner, a host of labor unions and progressive organizations. Thank you.
Hello, my name is JC Rowe. I'm actually proxying in for Ben Bartlett today. I'm his campaign manager. So I'm here to talk about Mr. Bartlett as a Berkeley City Council member. He actually ran for office 8 years ago now, after his mother was displaced from housing. Her and her 3 other friends were living in their Golden Girls era in Berkeley. Because the landlord wanted to move her out, he cut the electricity and he cut the water. 2 of her roommates ended up dying during the process of her being displaced. When Ben went to the county to ask about housing for his mom, he learned not only that is the #1 displaced person in Alameda County, a 62-year-old here, but also there was a 14-year waiting list for housing. And so that motivated him to run for office. As he ran for office over the last 7 years, he's been able to build 1,000 affordable housing units and create a mental health care system called Step Up Housing that includes 15,000 mental health beds being created throughout Berkeley in order to help deal with the mental health crisis that we all see every day. Ben Bartlett has a proven track record, and I would love for y'all to check him out, check out the work he's done. Most importantly, the police response time in Berkeley is under 2 minutes, and that's something that we want to see expanded throughout Alameda County. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Bowders, and thank you for the question, Mia. The question was about what unique factors qualify us for this office. This is an office, as was said, that's $4 billion. 70% of that funding is over the county social service safety net. So my unique factor is that I'm a formerly unhoused person. Over 20 years ago, as a young adult, I was unhoused. I lived in Southern California. My first place was a boarding house. I had the opportunity to join the AmeriCorps program. I leveraged that as a disaster relief director to get a scholarship to go back to school. And with that, I've spent 20 years in nonprofit service and advocacy. The first 10 of those years were working with people who had chronic mental health issues and addiction and substance use needs on the streets of Chicago. For the last 12 years, I've been living here in the Bay Area. I currently work as the policy director at the Alliance for Safety and Justice, which is a nonprofit organization looking to recenter public safety solutions around victims of crime. I'm an advocate for sexual assault and domestic violence and and sex trafficking victims in my full-time job. I've also been a member of the Emeryville City Council for the past 8 years. And in those roles, I've served as the chair of our county's Transportation Commission, as a member of the Air District for the region. The Sierra Club gave me their inaugural Visionary Award for my efforts to curb pollution from refineries over the past number of years. And I've been an advocate for affordable housing, helping pass Emeryville's Measure C, which is an affordable housing bond, building permanent supportive housing solutions for the homeless. Really look forward to working on the County Board of Supervisors with others who are interested in creating real lasting solutions from the unique perspective of somebody who's been a user of those service systems and has worked alongside people who need those interventions as well. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name's Ken Barrick, and I'm very happy to be back at Oakland Tech, where my son played for the basketball team for one short year before he was benched. He was very short at that time. I'm the founder of an organization called Seneca Family of Agencies, and Seneca started accidentally in 1985 when I was 29 years old, and I was a therapist, and the organization I was working with was going to close, and the young people that we were with were going to go to a shelter program because they didn't have a place to go. And Seneca was founded with the idea of creating unconditional care for young people across child welfare, mental health, juvenile justice, and the entire system of services. I'm an adoptive father, and I have had foster youth in my home, and I've worked with foster youth since the time that I began Seneca. But most importantly, I've combined that with policy work that brought wraparound care to California in the form of legislation as an advocate when I was with Seneca, that created community schools as a part of an overall effort from a book that we wrote called Unconditional Education. And we also wrote together a book called Unconditional Care with the team at Seneca. We've worked across mental health, child welfare, and juvenile justice for over 30 years to try to be unconditional, to try to create settings where systems couldn't fail young people, and young people weren't told that they were that they failed the systems that they were supposed to be served by. I'm pleased to be here to speak to you about it.
Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Greg Hodge, and I'd be honored to serve as the next member of the Board of Supervisors for District 5. I'm just happy to be here at a high school because I saw that there was going to be young people here, and I got excited because all of these forums that we've done so far have generally been folks that are our age, fam. And I'll just be kind because, and I think it's just really important to say to young people in this community that we have a vision, and that vision includes you. That vision is for a safer community, a community where people are housed, a community where economic opportunity is real. I think what makes all of us, we're all unique in some sort of way. But I think what makes me unique is that I've had a 40-year career here in Oakland as a consensus builder, as a minister, as a lawyer, as somebody who's worked on racial issues. You know, I'm a racial equity trainer, and I see the Race and Policy Academy work is here. I've served on the Oakland Board of Education. I was actually the first manager of what's now the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth. And so with that, as a parent of 5 and a grandparent of 1, I've been seeing kind of all ends of life. I've seen my children grow up and thrive in this community, and I've also taken care of a mom who illness, Parkinson's disease, took her out. And so it's just, it makes a difference. Like, relevant experience makes a difference. I think that as we go forward, we are really looking for transformative work on the next Board of Supervisors, because we've had a board that's been relatively stodgy and sedate. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm Chris Moore, and a lot of people say, why is this guy running? I'm not a career politician. I'm a concerned resident. I've lived in Alameda County for 40 years, and I've seen lots of changes, and like many out in the community, nobody's seen it the way it is today, and that's why I'm concerned, and that's why I'm running. I spent many years auditing as a CPA, auditing the city of Berkeley, city of Hayward, Port of Oakland, and numerous other not-for-profits in the community. And what that helped me do is drive accountability across those organizations. We do spend $4.1 billion here in Alameda County. And that 4.1 billion is not tracked properly. We can see all the problems where it has gotten us. This county in this area has basically a history and a common theme where they reelect time and time again career politicians. Those career politicians have not solved our problem at all. They've spent a lot of money, but they have not solved our problem. We have a public safety crisis. It's clear. Everybody has to look over their shoulder when they're walking out in the streets here. We have a homelessness problem that's up 22%. We have unaffordable housing. It's one of the important questions. Housing is unaffordable. That's what I'm here to end. That's why I've joined this race. And I'm here to collaborate with the state, the county, and the cities, stop the turf wars, and bring everybody together to solve our solutions, solve our problems. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Laurel Plimier, and I am a mom of 2 teenagers. I have a nephew who goes to Oakland Tech, is a junior. And I have lived in Alameda County in District 5 for more than 20 years. What makes me unique for this position, I went back to school fairly recently to get a master's degree in data science because I wanted to help governments to make decisions that were data-driven and that could actually help the people that their policies are intended to serve. I'm also an attorney, and I believe that my experience as an attorney and a data scientist make me well-suited to make decisions for the county that will help effectuate their policies. I also have a strong leadership experience with I am a U.S. Army veteran, and I was a platoon leader in the Army in Germany, and I served as a communications site officer in charge in Turkey, helping a mission that enforced the no-fly zone over Iraq. I also have strong leadership experience with the League of Women Voters, where I have helped advocate for policy within Alameda County, which is what led me to want to run for this position, and leadership at the state level, bringing groups of people together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidates. My name is Stephen Moorhead. I'm a junior at Oakland Tech and a varsity debater. So given that your predecessor, Keith Carson, was elected into this role in 1992 and has served for over 30 years, what's your opinion on like maximum term limits for positions of public office such as this one?
Okay, again, I'm speaking for Ben Bartlett out of Berkeley, Berkeley City Council. So there's pros and cons to term limits. The pros being that allows for new people to run, right? Hence, most people on this board either have never ran before or they're new within the last 10 years. The cons are it takes a long time to pass legislation. Sometimes it can take more than 2 terms to pass legislation. And so I think we just kind of have to weigh it out based on the position, based on the vision, based on the work. But it's a great question. Thank you.
This guy is the
they're doing
manager of the guy's, he's his campaign manager. This is at Oakland Tech, yeah. And look at here, there's only 44 people watching.
That shows you what
What a
they think
shame.
about it.
I know.
There she is, big smile. Mhm.
I think this is when they say, please pardon our interruption. Okay, thank you for the question, Stephen. The question about term limits is a really important one, and I think those who are paying attention to the national discourse are very aware of the impacts of not addressing that question. I support what the state law is for state legislators, which is 12 years. It provides us with a balance between 2 things that are really important, which JC mentioned. The first is that it actually takes time when you're in office to do the work that's necessary to accomplish things. It doesn't always take that long to pass legislation in my experience, but it does take time to build coalitions, to really understand the community, meet everybody, and actually make momentum with what you're doing. But you have to balance that against the purpose of democracy. Democracy in ancient Greece was designed so that one person in every village every year would make a trip to Athens and they'd cast a vote, and they had the sole responsibility of representing their town. And they'd come back, and when they came back, it was no longer their responsibility, and somebody else was selected from a basket of straws to go and do that the following year. I really personally believe, as a young person and the youngest person in this race, and as somebody who was in grade school when the current incumbent was last elected to his first time in this office, that it's really important that we make space for younger voices. And I think the proper way to do that is to balance historical knowledge and institutional work with the need to ensure that we have places at the table for younger voices, because currently government is not representative of all the people who are in it. We can change that with term limits.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with John here. 12 years should be the maximum, but we really have to also think about how do you implement that? How do you phase that in? Because you don't want a situation where you don't have those new term limits come in all at once. So you need to be able to stagger those. So you need to be able to say, we're going to have two of the members come in, or three of the members come in at one phase, and three and two, excuse me, three at one phase and two at the other, so that you know that you've always got some experience. And experience does count on a board. Experience makes a difference. I've served on my board. This is my 4th term. And I think it would actually have benefited our board to have had term limits. And I think that it also lets people be prepared to know, unlike this situation, when you might run. I had exactly one day to decide to run for this office. There were other qualified people who might have run if there had been a clear succession of authority. So I think 12 years does make sense, as long as it's staggered, as long as we still have experience on the board, so that you never have a board that's all 5 new people.
Thanks. I agree that there ought to be term limits in this role. In California, all throughout the state, this is one of the roles that people sort of get for life. You get to serve for like 20 years and 25 years, and in Keith Carson's case, 31 years or 30, give or take. I think that we need to rethink a lot of roles in government. When I think about state assembly and the term limit process there, and we go for 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, and then people jump to Senate, make those terms a little bit longer. Make those like 2 4-year terms. In our national conversation, and this is for our young folks in the room, I'm just going to plant a seed. Your generation needs to have a constitutional convention where you basically change the rules of the game, where you then say, there's no reason that somebody could be in the Congress for 2 years, be in the Senate for 6 years, and people like Mitch McConnell who've been in the Senate forever. Most young people have no idea who they are, don't represent their interests, aren't tech savvy. As I get older, I appreciate the fact that I have some wisdom, but you don't have to be in office to exert that wisdom. You ought to be able to take advantage of succession planning and prepare the next generation for leadership in ways that actually make sense. Thanks.
Great. Question, how many counties in the Bay Area do not have term limits? 1, Alameda County. Alameda County is the only county that does not have term limits. And what do we have? We have long-term people who've been in office for many, many years. And we have grand jury reports that come out and say, hey, there's grants are given to family and grants are given to others. And so there's not accountability. So we're the only county with no term limits, and we're the only county that consistently has grand jury reports that says we're not really holding the entities that we provide funds to accountable. So absolutely, we need term limits. I think we should be similar to San Mateo, has 3 terms, 12 years. I think that makes sense. And it also doesn't allow the supervisors to get comfortable in their position and kind of rule and do what they want to do. And they don't have to necessarily listen to the voters, because once they're in there, it seems like it's very difficult for others to run against them. So extremely important for Alameda County to move in that direction. Of course, it is the will of the people. It's a charter change, so the voters need to vote on it. And we'd want to, of course, have that as well. Thank you.
I will agree with everyone else that I support term limits. I think 12 years is a good number of years, and rotating 3 groups of supervisors for 4 years each. It's important to balance term limits with institutional knowledge, but I think a 12-year term limit would take care of that, no problem. The other thing, I also agree that having a succession plan and knowing when somebody is going to term out is good for democracy. Having 3 days and whoever can scramble and file papers within those 3 days is probably not the best solution for democracy. The other thing that I wanted to just throw out there is that if there are 5 supervisors on the current board, and that was determined many years ago when the population was a lot lower. I think more voices on the Board of Supervisors would benefit the community and would be better for a democracy, because the supervisors would better able to represent the smaller communities that they would represent. So I would recommend not only changing to term limits, but also adding in that we need to expand our board to accommodate our expanded population in Alameda County.
Oh.
Do I need to start again so Zoom can hear me, or? Okay, it's just about Zoom not hearing us. At any rate, my first term was about building relationships and coalitions, getting to know the inner workings of government, the various branches of government, and partnering with them, passing policy. And my second term has been about deepening that as well as implementing policy. I support term limits for the Board of Supervisors. I would be willing to put that to the ballot with a maximum of 3 terms, 12 years. I co-sponsored Measure X in Oakland, and so Oakland City Council members starting this year, or last year rather, have term limits of 3 terms.
My name is Eric Johnson. I'm a varsity debater with the Oakland Tech debate team. And my question is, the county's core function is to provide the social safety net, including medical care for low-income and uninsured people, social services like welfare programs and foster care, and homeless services. So given that homelessness and poverty are worsening in our county, what is a new solution or initiative that does not currently exist that you would champion as county supervisor to combat homelessness and poverty?
Thank you for the question, Eric. So as I mentioned, I've been working for over 20 years on this issue, and what we actually need is not more initiatives and new things. We need to take the money and the services and the programs we have now, we need to use them effectively. That's actually what we need to do the most. But I will say 2 things on that point. One, in my full-time job a number of years ago, I was asked by the Speaker of the State Assembly to assist with a budget item, which we crafted something called the CalWorks Housing Support Program. The East Bay Times wrote an editorial today endorsing me in this race, and they cited, among other things, my work on that project, which brought housing solutions to over 12,000 families in California who are in what's called our Welfare to Work program. They're low-income mothers who are working towards self-sufficiency, and they're on public assistance, but they're facing homelessness, and they have to decide decide, do I want to spend my time trying to find a place of shelter for my family and I, or am I going to continue on my job training and employment track? And they shouldn't have to make that choice. We should provide those safety net solutions to them proactively. And so the budget that was allocated in 2014 was $20 million. This year, the state has made it a $285 million program. It's grown in a successful way. It continues to keep people who are trying to be self-sufficient from going out onto the streets. Other programs I would say that are initiatives is you can look at San Diego has done something called Project 25, where it identified the 25 most costly users of the social safety net program. It put them in housing and paired them immediately with social welfare programs. And what it found was that they had reduced emergency room visits, reduced time in jail, and reduced police response times. All those things save taxpayers money by prioritizing a smaller amount of social services around a concentrated number of people who need our most care.
Oh my goodness, folks, now we're getting into something that I can talk to you about. And as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at Casey, who started a guaranteed income program in Alameda County along with Dave Brown and this board for foster youth. It should have been done a long time ago. There is so much that we can do that we're not doing. There are probably between 200 and 300 beds in this county right now when you talk to the providers that are empty, that could be filled if we had a more expeditious way of moving people into those beds. And yet, our system creates blocks that are unnecessary. There is talent in this county in both on the county side and in the community-based organization side that if you turn them loose, we could put hundreds of street workers on the street to engage people, and we could create scattered site housing for all but the most mentally ill people who are on the street. We could do that right now, folks, and yet we create barrier after barrier for the existing resources that we know we could put into place. Insight Housing right now has a budget of $32 million in Berkeley. $32 million. That should be about 50% behavioral health funded, which would bring in mostly federal and state dollars. They have 1.5 million in behavioral health. That's the county's failure, no one else's. We can do so much better. One other thing in terms of new solutions, my friend Andre Chapman is starting something called Fostering Promise. Foster youth end up being homeless at rates that are well beyond the regular population. We should never allow a former foster youth to be homeless.
Cool. I agree with a lot of what's been said so far. And, you know, even the premise of the question is kind of interesting because a while back I saw a definition of genius. So genius is the idea that you take existing ideas and combine them in an innovative way. Einstein didn't come up with the principles behind the theory of relativity. Those principles were already in existence, right? But that thought about how do you create something that is new and innovative in the moment that you need the idea matters. I think that the county has right now a homelessness plan on the books. The county declared a state of emergency around homelessness back in September. It's on the books. But what happened? When you read that resolution, the County Board of Supervisors didn't add any additional dollars to that work, right? In Houston, Texas, and I have to admit, I don't like taking examples from Texas. But no offense to any Texans who are in the room, right? But the idea is that Houston, the city of Houston and Harris County brought their homelessness down by 67%. How? They had a plan. They had a state of emergency, and the thing that they let loose, Ken, was 100 nonprofit organizations working with the county, with the city on this issue. The mayor convened all those folks at a convening several years ago, and that's what made the difference. Working together, consensus building. How do you do that? We know how to do that. We just don't have the will to do it.
Thank you. I agree. Actually, housing's the core issue here. I do think, though, there is first, and everybody may know I'm focused on public safety. I just want to mention, if we don't have public safety as a foundation for our community, which we don't today, we have businesses leaving. We have Kaiser, Southwest Airlines, many other businesses threatening to leave or moving out. They pay tax dollars into the system. Those tax dollars go into the county, go into the city, go into the county. They provide that safety net that provides mental health for our community, that provides housing and public housing for our community. If we don't focus on that immediately and stop the downward spiral, we don't have the funds to provide the safety net for the community. Now, what's happening in housing? We know, and I've been out on the streets. Maybe many of you may have seen. I was out in West Oakland, and I participated in Count Up. I think as Councilmember Bass did as well. And what did we hear in that a few weeks ago? Everybody said, 90% of the people I talked to, they said, I'm not going to go into the housing. I'm rather stay out here on the street because they think they will be killed in a house. Literally, that's what they said. I will get killed in that place. So we're not taking best practices here in the community. For some reason, Alameda County is not taking best practices. We should look at Reno. We should look at Houston and take those best practices to bring that and figure out how to get people off the street. And I'll talk about housing more in a later one. Thank you.
Thank you. So the question was what unique solutions, and some people have already said this, but I think there are no unique solutions. We already know what needs to be done to combat homelessness and poverty. We just aren't implementing the solutions that we know exist, which is unfortunate. I would recommend housing first, and I know that homelessness services need to go hand in hand with that, but we can continue to provide homelessness services to the people who need those services over and over and over again. And unless we provide housing to actually house the people who need those services, we're not actually solving the problem. So housing needs to be the priority. And in order to create more housing, we need to make sacrifices. We can't create housing in the system we currently live in. We need to either have higher density so that we allow for housing where we used to restrict to single family zoning, or we need to reduce the cost of housing by being creative with either climate change regulations, safety regulations. There's always some sort of compromise that needs to happen. And when we realize that there is that compromise that needs to happen, we will eliminate some of the barriers to actually creating the housing.
Thank you for this important question. I do think it's true that the county has a plan, and it's important to have someone in the county who can implement the plans that are in place. In the city of Oakland, we passed public lands for public good policy in 2018, and I was able to take a parcel of land by the lake and turn that into a tiny home village to house dozens of residents who are now in housing. More than that, that parcel of land is actually going to be home to 2 buildings that are 100% affordable housing, and we're breaking ground on one of those in the coming months. And I think what we have to do is take the county's Home Together plan and implement it. The first piece is prevention, preventing evictions through rental subsidies. The second piece is intervention, intervening when someone is first becoming homeless to prevent them from becoming chronically homeless, and then creating affordable housing. In terms of new things we could try, there aren't things that are brand new, but there are a few things that could make a big difference. One of them is a guaranteed income pilot. Going beyond the pilots that we've done and making that a permanent program, and specifically helping our most vulnerable foster youth, transitional age youth, and women and children who are being trafficked. Those pilots have shown good outcomes in terms of keeping people housed and helping them stay healthier and above poverty. The other thing we could try is social housing, and there's definitely an opportunity to do that with working with our county treasurer. Thank you.
So the first law being passed in Berkeley was the step-up housing law. And just to talk a little bit about how long it took to implement, it took 7 years before they started groundbreaking last year from the time that the law was passed. Now, what makes this interesting is how he wants to finance the continuation of step-up housing. It's through a medical innovation district financed through impact bonds, something totally new, not done before in Alameda County. And this will allow for the creation of the 15,000 units and finance them on the future taxes that will be taken off of those units. And so that's just one way, but it's already working in Berkeley, and we want to expand that here in Alameda County. Another way is, as most of the colleagues here have said, stop the poverty management here in Alameda County, right? Is instead of paying people to barely make it, let's encourage people and write policies in the way where you can rent to own your affordable housing unit. So we're not just maintaining as a landlord for the next 20 to 30 years for a group of people and keeping them poor at the same time. And so what I appreciate about Ben's policies is he's always thinking outside the box, and it's very common sense policies that we can bring forth, and he's already done the work in Berkeley. And I like to say that over and over again. Thank you all.
Hello, my name is Emily Ng, and I'm a varsity debater on the Oakland Tech debate team. My question for you tonight is, what would you do as county supervisor to increase the ease of access for students to get the health and mental health resources they need? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like an exception so that I can talk about this for about a half hour, 45 minutes, if that's okay. But let me just start by saying, you want to see talent in mental health, look to the back of the room there. With 2 months of training, you could see some of the most talented peer mental health professionals that you would ever meet. Those folks in the back of the room could save lives if we trained them and supported them to do what they needed to do, and young people would go to them. I got to work with a young man named Nia Doe, and as a junior in high school, he started advocating for peer support for students, and he got the governor to put $10 million into legislation in his senior year as a high school student, because the governor recognized how important peer support was, paired with professionals. Any therapists or counselors in the room? Oh, well, then I can't get in as much trouble as I could have. But paired with professionals, because sometimes the problems do go beyond what a peer support can do. Look, there is so much going on in mental health right now, and we are not executing as a county. We need to execute both at the school level. For example, there's a new schedule of fees that would allow us to bill insurance companies directly through schools without any co-payment, and we could be implementing that right now to save jobs. Piedmont is cutting their counseling staff right now. They don't have to. We can be billing for those services across both private insurance and Medi-Cal. We can also have tiered supports that can reach out when young people are really struggling. And we can create access by having seamless intake points that don't require you to go through an IEP or 10 levels of bureaucracy in order to get the help you need. A teacher should be able to refer directly, and there should be no lag time. And we could do that right now because the funding is there. Stop sign. I didn't get my extra half hour.
That's okay. I'll pick up where you left off. No, I think that this is one of the most important issues that we can talk about post-pandemic. A lot of our children have dealt with social isolation and undiagnosed depression and a range of other things. As parents, we see it. As grandparents, we see it. And I've had multiple conversations with people in this community about the failure of our big systems to really address it. So there's a couple of things in addition to what Ken outlined that I'd like to see happen. One, make sure that our clinicians have spaces like the African American Wellness Hub that's been proposed by African American psychologists. Number two, just this morning, I was with a group of folks who were part of a training with part of what I'm doing as a member of the Brotherhood of Elders Network, something called Healing Generation Institute. And we're basically working with about 40 folks here in the city who are working at the ground level with young folks to do culturally proficient healing circles, where young people can get into the conversations they need to have. We've experienced that at Sons and Brothers Camp over the last 7 years before the pandemic. The last thing I'll say is that the same group of psychologists opened a couple of spaces just before the pandemic at West Oakland Youth Development Center as a way of doing walk-in sessions with young people. So there's a range of things we can do. We can use Medi-Cal dollars for reimbursement to pay for a lot of it, but I think it is essential that the County of Alameda play an important role in this work.
Thank you. Yeah, great question. I think we all grew up in situations where we've had um, mental health issues in school. And I think there's traditionally and still today, there exists stigmas around it. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things which makes it difficult for some students are willing to reach out and look for help and others are not. And so you need to have creative means to help access all students and all children in school to help help provide these services. My understanding is, and I do work up in Albany with the school district there and Piedmont here, and my understanding is we have different policies across every school district. So everybody is doing, and even in the schools, everybody's kind of taking their own approach at it. And that tends to, you know, maybe you can focus on it in some schools and maybe you can have some flexibility, but I think we do have to have a more standardized approach. And I think as what I would do as supervisor is work with all of the school districts in my community. I'd even work with Tony Thurman and bring him in and work and help get advice for how do we standardize this type of care across the school districts and in the community, and how can we really drive results. And I guess this also gets back to the accountability. If we're not providing, we're providing funds today and we're not getting proper, you know, we're not really getting what we're spending our money on. We need to drive accountability in those services, and we can do it by collaborating with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So stigma is an issue with getting services, especially mental health services. And cost is another issue. Thank you, Ken, for pointing out some ways of addressing the cost issue. The other thing that I would like to say, one thing that's really important to me, and this applies to many things, not just to healthcare for students, is that we need to be looking at the upstream causes of the problems that we have, and we need to look for community-based solutions. So solutions that are that can be implemented within the schools where the students are. As far as upstream goes, our education system has not changed much in many, many years, and it is not working for a lot of kids. I have 2 teenagers. I have a 9th grader and a 10th grader. It works fine for some kids. For many kids, it doesn't. And I think we need to be looking very creatively for solutions to the way our society is set up, educating our kids so that they don't suffer from the mental health issues to begin with.
Thank you for this question. I think I want to start out by saying our systems are really fractured. We need to look at the whole student. That is not something that our systems are set up to do, but could do better. We need to make sure that we're building towards community schools and that students are getting more services, more access, and that they're culturally rooted. I mentioned earlier that I'm the mother to a teenage daughter. My daughter was a sophomore, actually a junior in high school when COVID hit. And so she spent her junior and high school years sheltering in place in a Zoom environment, and she's now in college. But that disruption has really impacted her and so many of her peers. And I was reminded recently that the county had school-based health centers not too long ago, and that's something we need to reinvest in. It's something that as an Oakland City Council member, I have been focused on. A couple years ago, when I worked on my council president's budget proposal, we invested much more in the Department of Violence Prevention. And one of those pieces was investing in violence interrupters, life coaches, and gender-based specialists in our high schools. And that is an important piece of making sure that we're addressing the whole student. That is something we can continue to do across our schools, making sure the county is working with our school districts and our community college districts. And certainly as supervisor, I'm committed to implementing the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative. This is a state initiative that is focused on the whole student, that's focused on expanding who healers are, like the peers that were mentioned, and also making sure we're looking at alternatives like restorative justice. Thank you.
So when I asked Ben this question, It was very cute because he said, nobody cares about the young people, but I do, right? And he's been advocating for young people. So in Berkeley, he actually funded mental health counselors in the schools already as a city council member. And as a county supervisor, he'll also fund mental health in the foster care system and in the juvenile detention homes. And so it's work that he's already done. It's work that he'll continue to do and expand. It's already a precedent for it. Thank you. Doesn't take 90 seconds when you do the work.
Emily, I want to thank you for asking my favorite question of the evening. And I hate that I had to go last, but I want to give it the dignity it deserves. So my journey, not just to elected office, but in life, began as a young person who had a mental health crisis. I came out as a teenager in the 90s in a very conservative, small, rural community, and there were absolutely no services for me. And I had a really, really hard time with this. And my entire professional career has been spent around how do we remove barriers to that. I ran for office in city council because I felt invisible my whole life, and I felt like there has to be some way to make other people visible. I would just say that we don't listen very well. We don't listen. Young people are not seen and they're not heard. That's not just in representative government, that's in their own classroom. There are world events that go on today that are totally outside of the realm of anything that even I, as the youngest person up here, ever dealt with as a young person. Global events, COVID was mentioned, right? You have all kinds of things going on in your life. Climate change, these are all real things that are impacting you, and there are more young people who are in mental health crisis today than we've ever had in this country. And that is not by chance. So my work in my role, I worked on Assembly Bill 340 in 2017, which provided for screenings, which is now in the Medi-Cal programs. We actually screen kids in the periodicity schedule. We actually ask them questions that help us identify adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, that they have, so we can actually filter them into mental health care early. Because people who don't get care for mental health care end up exhibiting behaviors that turn them into what we call criminals. And that is how the school to prison pipeline exists, and we need to end it by investing in mental health.
Hi, my name is Lucy. I'm a senior at Oakland Tech, and I'm the co-captain of the debate team. Considering low graduation rates and high homelessness rates of foster kids after aging out of the system, how would you help improve the life outcomes of kids in foster care while they're in the child welfare system, and specifically once they age out of foster care?
Thank you for the question. I think that the work that we've got to do on this issue is really important. That if young people who are going through the foster care system, the sort of predictor of where they will end up if we don't intervene is in that school to prison pipeline. So I think that we've got to give a lot of resources to emancipated youth and their housing. The way that we're doing, one of the projects that I'm working with right now is called Rise East. It's a $50 million investment from a national foundation, and another $50 million we have to raise locally. But one of the ideas that we want to do is to actually create housing for emancipated youth, the youth who are like 18, 19, 20 years old, up until 26, 27 years old, in those spaces, and do it in a way that's supportive to make sure that we have job training. I served on the Workforce Investment Board for about 9 years, and so I got a chance to see and hear young people talking a lot about the lack of job opportunities. And as adults, it's just kind of weird and funny and strange that we would talk about summer jobs. Young people need jobs year round. They need to have meaningful work during the school year, where they, like a lot of us as older adults had that after school job. That's how we learned how to work. We had the summer job. We had the job where I cut somebody's grass was my first job before I then got a job as a lifeguard at a pool. But that idea of being able to have sort of scaffold up to those opportunities all the way until you're 26, 27 years old. And just, I know just as a parent, our young people aren't necessarily ready to leave home when they graduate from high school or college. And so I'm part of that boomerang dynamic. They come back, they throw them out there, you come back. And so we've got to do a much better job with kids, especially kids who are in the foster care system.
You know, a couple more stats. In 35% of foster kids do not graduate high school, right? That's across the states. 2% go on to college, only 2%. Of all those that go on to college, only 2% actually graduate. So those are bad stats. It's actually worse in Alameda County. So what do we have to do? There's obviously a number of problems for that, but I agree with Greg here. It's about jobs, right? And it's about, it's mentorship and Big Brother, but it's also jobs. And the program I would implement is the county, again, out of the $4 billion, couple billion goes out to not-for-profits and other agencies across the entire county. Those are opportunities for internships for foster kids, and we should write it's mandated basically. If there are funds provided to a not-for-profit or other agency in the community, they need to give an internship to a foster child. And I think that is kind of one way of helping to solve that issue, because it's really actually about all youth. It's about giving jobs and having more opportunity for them in the community. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. So kids are in foster care not because they had a loving and stable family life. And again, I will say my focus is on upstream community-based solutions. And if we have programs in the community, and some of these exist, and we can certainly implement them in Alameda County, where we are providing services to families who are at risk of losing their kids into the foster care system, then we are supporting those kids before they get into the system and preventing the problem initially from occurring. Once you're in the foster care system, you are already suffering from the trauma of whatever caused you to be taken away from your family, and adding to that trauma, being away from your family. It's a rough place to start, so it is not surprising that the kids in foster care are struggling to get by. There's only so much we can do on that end. Some kids are going to end up in the foster care system anyway. Once they're there, we need to be providing comprehensive, holistic services to them that include mental health services and added educational supports. Once kids then age out of the foster care system, when they are beginning to find themselves in situations that are more precarious and might end up being homeless, then we need to be providing things like potentially universal basic income, which has been proven in pilot programs to work.
Thank you for this question. I'm really proud on the Oakland City Council to have been a strong partner with youth and with youth organizations, as well as with OUSD. I mentioned earlier in 2019, as the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth was about to sunset, I worked with organizations that serve youth, children, and families in order to reauthorize it another 12 years. And that's about $18 million a year in programs that serve literally thousands of young people and families. That's an example of programs that really help fill the gaps and also support youth who are in foster care or transitioning out of foster care. The other partnership that I've been able to help create is working with OUSD around a career technical education hub and housing for transitional age youth. This is something in 2021 through our budget process in Oakland that our council made a commitment to. The following year, I put funds into the budget, $350,000 to support strategic planning. And this is going to help serve 150 transitional age youth with a host of things, including having stable housing, having wraparound services, having job training, both in terms of tech as well as hands-on construction and other careers. And this is something that has been advocated for by young people themselves. And I think it's important to look at solutions in partnership and help to implement them. Thank you.
So first I want to point out that we've been to at least a dozen forums, and this is the first time the question around foster children come up. And so that can be appreciated. My wife and I actually had 2 foster care children back in 2017 and 18 that were twins, while at the same time raising our own 6-month-old. And from that experience, and Ben and I have talked about this a lot, the whole foster care system needs support. Everybody in the system needs support. The parents need support. The foster care parents need support. The courts need support. It's a lot of work that goes into taking care of these young people and making sure they have what they need. And so as everybody has said it already, all right, housing, healthcare, and support. I think the thing that's wrong with the policies is that it was at 18 and 21, everything expires. And just like Obama implemented back in the day, healthcare extended to 26 if you live with your parents, we should have something of that similar precedent for all foster care students who obviously can't live with their parents up until the age of 26. So that should have really been a rollover policy if we were thinking with common sense. Thank you. But it's something that definitely matters. Children that go through that, it's hard. It's just hard on every level. The mental, the physical, potential abuse from the past. That's not something that any one or two people can deal with, even a peer counselor. That would be way too much of a burden for one person. And so to have truly comprehensive wraparound services, it makes a difference. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Lucy. There's been a lot of really good answers that are substantive, but with 90 seconds, if I was to answer this question about how do we address foster youth who go into the homeless services system, the criminal justice system and the homeless services system are both dramatically overrepresented by young people who are coming from or in foster care. And that is an indictment on the quality of care that we provide as a county to children who are in our custody and care when they're in that system. But at the core of it, job training, all these other things, if you don't have community to support you, all of those things are a failed investment in the end. We have this fake and totally unrealistic expectation that all these young people are going to be resilient, that they're going to all just somehow pick themselves up by their bootstraps and do this themselves. So I'm very proud of the fact that in Emeryville, when we passed Measure C, which is our $50 million affordable housing bond, I asked the city council the following year to go back, and through the state legislature in partnership with Senator Josh Becker, we passed Senate Bill 591. And Senate Bill 591 removed barriers to creating intergenerational housing. So in Emeryville, at 4300 in San Pablo, we're going to be building a project where 80% of the housing units are for seniors who are on fixed incomes and live alone, and 20% of those units will go to foster youth aging out of care who have no family. Intergenerational programming that provides benefits. Seniors receive benefits from having young people expose them to and help them do daily things like talking to their grandkids on technology and giving young people life skills on finances and other things that will help them be self-sufficient. That intergenerational component is important, and it can't be done in a vacuum with just job training.
Thank you for the question, and it's such an important question. And I learned about this by making every mistake in the book when I started my career. When I first started working with young people who were in foster care, I thought I was saving them from their parents. And then not long after that, the first one of the young people that I was helping to raise had her own kids. And I could no more blame her for what she was struggling with than I could if she were my own child. And in fact, I helped raise her kids. And so when John talks about intergenerational supports, my friend Kevin Campbell said, if you show me the most troubled child in your system, I'll show you the loneliest child in your system. And that's what happens to foster youth. And it happens first when we, in some cases, needlessly separate them from their families. And we have to stop doing that. We have to make the shift. And I've been working on this in a pilot in Southern California, from teachers being mandated reporters to being mandated supporters first. And we have to give teachers the resources to do that seamlessly. I've talked to so many teachers who have made a CPS report when they said, I didn't know what else to do. There was nothing else for me to do. I see. And if we could seamlessly provide the support before it becomes a crisis, when we see a young person, maybe even a kindergartner, where the family is struggling, we could help so many young people never come into foster care, and we could support those families to stay together. That's where we have to be first. And then after we do that, when we can't do that, we still need to make sure that we don't make foster youth the loneliest people on the planet. You have to have a connection in life. Most people in this room are lucky enough to be connected to people who support and care for them. The minute you isolate a person from their family, the minute you isolate them from your community, you start a cycle of injustice that is almost irreparable. So we need to think about that. We need to think first and foremost about love as the central concept in foster care.
My name is Connor, and I'm a varsity debater for the Oakland Tech debate team. And for this question, I have a little bit of context for the audience. The county sheriff is an elective position which provides policing services to the unincorporated areas of Alameda County, and cities oversee their own police departments. But Alameda County is responsible for mental health services countywide. The question is, what, in your opinion, is the role of policing in response to mental health calls? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think this primarily came up as an issue across all our minds over the last few years, and certainly during COVID. What happened at the same time is our community leaders kind of cast doubt on our law enforcement community. And so started casting doubt and started moving funds away from our law enforcement community to other programs that were untested, but also did not communicate well with the police department and our law enforcement community. So what we have, and we have that today, is that we have a situation where there's these, on one hand, our public officials are still casting doubt across the law enforcement community and not propping them up, and they're accusing them all of being bad apples in a way. But they're not. In every industry, there are bad apples. In some industries, but in the law enforcement community, some may be, but most are not. What we need to do is collaborate those two teams. We need to have, so they can actually work together to provide the appropriate response when we have mental health issues out in our community. And that's what's key, and it's not being done today, and that's what I'll drive as County Supervisor.
Thank you for this question. There are some situations where the sheriff response to a mental health crisis is appropriate if that crisis is violent and might risk health or well-being for the public or for the individual. But in most cases, mental health crises should be addressed by other people who are trained to handle mental health crises. And there are programs currently in Oakland that are doing this. I think most of these programs are relatively new, but I think it's called Macro program in Oakland has community trained individuals who will respond to calls that police might otherwise have responded to, and they will provide services to individuals who need services that don't escalate up to the level that policing is actually required. We also need to expand those programs so that they are more than just in Oakland, and so that they cover a greater amount of types of calls, which will alleviate the burden on, in the unincorporated areas, the sheriff's department, and in cities, the police department, so that they can respond to actual crimes.
Thank you for this question. I think this question does recognize that there are a number of 911 calls that are not appropriate for police. These are often mental health calls or low-level calls, and I'm really proud to have been part of working with the community in Oakland to put forward the Macro program that you just heard about. It's a program of crisis responders in our fire department so that we get an appropriate response. And I think for the county, certainly we need to have more of those programs, but we also need to address how those crisis responders are able to really help people in crisis. And I think it's important to recognize that we don't have enough care, we don't have enough treatment beds, we don't have enough housing. There's an interplay between mental health, housing, homelessness, and incarceration. And we have all, I think we've all heard about what's happening at Santa Rita Jail and are very concerned. In fact, Just last week, there was a report of somebody dying in the jails after being incarcerated for 2 days. So at the end of the day, I think it's really important, and I'm committed to implementing the reimagining adult justice recommendations. That includes oversight of the sheriff. It also includes making sure that we're investing in treatment, treatment beds, as well as in housing. And there are ways that we can make sure that if someone is in crisis and they are picked up by the sheriff or by police, that they don't go directly to jail, but they actually go to a treatment space, Amber House, or some other care navigation center where they'll get the support and treatment that they need.
So in Berkeley, being created the specialized care unit, it was a groundbreaking law that he just passed recently that comprises of mental health care workers and social workers, mental health care professionals and social workers. So they've been implemented all throughout town in Berkeley. Part of that wasn't taking funding away from the police. It was literally just creating funding for this special care unit. Because if there is something of violence, as Laurel mentioned, that you do want the police for safety. But mental health, no violence, we shouldn't have to call the police. And so pointing that out, Ben, I wouldn't say he would say this directly, but the shootings in Berkeley went down 39%. And so it's a clear contradiction to the numbers in Oakland, which is a little bit higher than that. But it's because they've been able to identify repeat offenders, some of those mental health care patients who have maybe created some type of problems in the past. They were able to identify them, give them some services, and get them off of the street, and that cut down the crime activities in Berkeley. And you can see it when you walk around town. It feels safe. Peace.
Thanks for the question, Connor. You know, the question asks, what in my opinion is the role of policing? So there's two answers to that question. First is if there's a public safety threat or a crime in progress, the response is a public safety response. Many times people call for a police response and there's actually a health response required. There's a person going through crisis and somebody calls because they either don't know what to do, they're afraid a situation may get worse, or they actually just care about the person. They don't know how else to get help for that person. And that's when we need to have an intervention. So something I worked on with former Senator Lonnie Hancock when she was the budget chair in the state Senate is something called the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, or we call it LEAD. LEAD was piloted first in the city of Seattle, and it's a program where law enforcement partners with community-based health organizations, the prosecutor's office, and when they encounter a person who's going through a mental health or an addiction crisis, and they're engaged in some behavior that is not violent, but it's something of a lower level nature, they actually divert the person altogether from booking. They don't get taken to Santa Rita jail for booking. Instead, they're diverted in a partnership to a nonprofit organization that provides them community-based mental health care with housing supports. That's how you actually divert a person to a proper care treatment, because currently Santa Rita is the place where we actually hold in bed the highest number of people who have an unmet mental health need in Alameda County. That's an unacceptable venue for that. People who are engaged in that work as a sheriff at the jail, they're not trained to provide those services, and that's not a place to get competent care. And that's something that needs to be seriously looked at, and we need to have independent oversight about that. But we also need to really follow what the Reimagining Adult Justice Initiative Alameda County started studying is calling for, which is more diversion programs so that people with mental health needs aren't being sent into the jail.
Yeah, I'm going to get in trouble on this one. There should be no place for police as the primary responders in mental health crisis. No place. They should be backup. They should be support if there's a health and safety issue, and the primary responder should be a mental health professional in every case. And we have absolutely failed as a community. We've failed as a state on this. And just having mobile response is nowhere near enough. But the average, I've run mobile response teams all over the state of California. And in very few cases are we funded to have two to three levels of backup. In other words, the first team goes out. Is there a backup team to come in behind so that you don't have a long response time? The answer in most places in the state of California, and certainly in Alameda County, is in most cases there is not. So now you start having 30, 60, 90, 120-minute wait for someone who's in mental health crisis. It is so utterly unacceptable, and we as a community, when there's now funding streams that can support this from the state and federal government, should be up in arms about it. And so what happens? We call police. And you know, you have Berkeley police who are actually among the best trained police in mental health crisis response in the state and in the country. Compare that to a state like New Jersey that has depth of mobile response, that has crisis teams, and that has tiered levels of care, so that when the crisis exceeds what the mobile response team can do, you can go to 23 hours. And when that's exceeded, you can go to a level of care that's secure and safe and where we take care of people. We need to do a lot better in this state, folks.
The benefit of going last is that you get to summarize what everybody else said that was smart, right? So, I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to add, except I want to say a couple things about this. One, there's a basic premise that I believe in strongly, that a fully resourced community is a safer community. So when you hear us talking about these issues, it has to do with, as Ken said, the resources, having the backup for the backup. During the reimagining public safety conversations that Nikki referred to, if I recall this, 85% of all calls were for nonviolent, what my friend David Muhammad calls cat in the tree problems. Getting somebody blocking your driveway. This just happened to me a couple of days ago. Somebody was blocking my driveway. The neighbors, we were looking around to see whose car it was. We couldn't figure out whose car it was. And I was reluctant to call 911 or the non-emergency number because, one, I knew that OPD wasn't going to show up. Not for that, right? Because we hope that they are showing up for more serious situations, right? So the cat in the tree problem, that's the metaphor for the things that police officers themselves say they don't want to deal with. They didn't get trained to deal with a mental health issue. Often they're not even trained to deal with a domestic violence issue if it's or domestic dispute, which is a little different from a domestic violence call. So I think that the way that I've experienced this a few years ago was something called Code 33. It was conversations between cops and kids, and the city had this idea of doing truancy stops. Like cops were supposed to pick up kids who were not in school by 8:30 or 9 o'clock. The cops hated this idea. We should talk more about this issue because we've learned a lot about what to do and what not to do over the years, and I think that that we can do a much better job on all of this.
Hello, I'm Rowan. I'm a junior and varsity debater at Oakland Tech. Many of today's young people are seemingly locked out of future home ownership and the economic and social benefits that would include. How would you improve the amount and diversity of home ownership in our district?
Thank you for the question. So there are two prongs to me for this question. One is very similar to my answer for the homelessness question. Young people are locked out of potential home ownership because there's a supply and demand problem. We have too much demand for housing and not enough homes, causes the cost of the homes to go up, and it makes them unaffordable for most people. The way to solve that problem is to build more homes. And I talked a little bit about how to do this before. We need to increase our density. We need to look at our bureaucracy and rules and regulations that are restricting the building of new homes. And if we want to look at population increase too, that's another component that affects the supply and demand. The other piece, I would say, this is a common refrain for me, we need to go upstream and look at upstream community-centered solutions. So if we can focus on opportunities for young people to actually survive and earn a livable wage to afford homes in our community, that will also help alleviate the problem. Affordable, high-quality education opportunities, opportunities for employment, job training, and living wage. And I'm not talking about minimum wage, I'm talking about an actual paying job that would allow you to afford the cost of purchasing a home in the community where you work.
This is a great question. I am fortunate enough to have bought my home with my partner in 1997. It's probably the most valuable asset I have. And for my daughter, who's 19, probably the only way that she will become a homeowner in the Bay Area. You know, one of the things I think is important when we look at how to improve home ownership is to look at the preservation strategy. And in 2019, my first year in office, because I had been already partnering with tenant organizations and the Oakland Community Land Trusts, we looked at preservation as a strategy, and I set aside $14 million in our budget so that we could pilot this program. And what we've been able to do during that time is work with tenants who are housing insecure. And I've visited with tenants, including tenants in single-family homes, who said every time there's a change in ownership in my home or my building, the rent goes up and I can potentially get displaced. And what we have been able to do is make sure that those tenants can partner with land trusts so that land trusts co-own those homes and they become permanently affordable. Much of our housing stock in North County and Oakland and Berkeley is older housing stock that could fit in this model. This model is now a much more popular model across the entire region. I'm on the board of the Association of Bay Area Governments, where we're working to put forward up to a $20 billion housing bond that can create up to 80,000 homes. And part of these funds could be used for this preservation strategy for home ownership. Thank you.
All right, this is an interesting question because I'm not a young person like y'all, but we're struggling with the same thing. So we live in a house that we pay rent on and we can't afford to buy. Make that make sense. But Ben has created the Open Doors Initiative for affordable homes ownership in Berkeley, and first-time buyers of modest income and the city employees. So he's created some policies. More so, Berkeley used to be a big NIMBY city, if you know, not in my backyard, right? Where they weren't allowing for a lot of development. And if you look along like the 4th Street corridor along the water now, you see development. If you're driving down Shattuck around Martin Luther King, going towards the Berkeley Bowl, you see some development. The Ashby, I call it the Ashby Flea Market, but it's actually a BART station, but it's a really good market there on Sundays. If you go over there, that's going to be a whole compound with affordable housing units, spaces for businesses. And that's another thing that Ben is pushing for, young people to become entrepreneurs. And so creating a program on the county level to help you become an entrepreneur here in the Bay Area. We lost a whole lot of businesses. We need to create some more. And so if we can make that happen, that will make it a little bit more affordable for you to operate here in this very, very expensive and luxurious town.
Thank you for your question, Rowan. There's a number of ways we could talk about this, but with 90 seconds, let me just address this. You have to treat a whole person, right? You can't look at this through a singular thing. So one of the things I've tried to lead on in Emeryville is the philosophy that we're a people-centric community, and that if we deliver people-centric policies, we can change lives. So that means that we have good wages, we have a fair work week ordinance, so that people who want to work jobs, whether that's minimum wage while they're going to school or otherwise, they don't have to work multiple jobs to help make that tuition payment or that rent payment. They can actually get predictable scheduling. We're one of the only cities in California, there's I think 3 or 4, that provide subsidized childcare to our employees and our residents. We passed a ballot measure that I championed for that to make sure that we had a dedicated funding stream, because childcare is something that people need. That's a prevention to housing affordability. Another thing that prevents housing affordability is transportation costs. So we run a free transit service called the Emery-Go-Round. We're building multimodal transportation options because you should have equitable transportation choices that allow you to spend your money and save it in a way that makes homeownership possible. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm the only candidate up here who's supported by the Housing Action Coalition, which is a group of affordable and nonprofit housing providers. I'm endorsed by the Northern California Carpenters Association, and I'm supported by housing leaders, including advocacy groups like East Bay for Everyone, who understand and have seen my leadership running Measure C, our affordable housing bond, creating our home ownership program. We have a first-time homeowner program. We have 250 homes the city purchased during redevelopment that we give and we sell to people. And when somebody moves out of the city to move into their home somewhere else, that goes back into the affordable market and it becomes a purchase opportunity for the next homeowner in our city. That's how we transfer wealth in the community and how we keep people here, including young people who want to be part of the future of this town.
We've got to get with the idea that we live in a different world. I'm going to talk to this side of the room because I keep talking to you all back there. I haven't even talked to you all over here. We live in a different world right now, and we really need to think about it. We need to do 2 things as it relates to the development community. We need to villainize those people who need to be villainized, and we need to lift up those developers who are willing to dig in and work with us. You know, there are over 900 housing units that are slated to go in an Oak Knoll Naval Base. They bought out the entire affordable allocation, not a single affordable unit on that entire naval base. That is unacceptable. It should not be allowed. It shouldn't ever have been allowed. And then there's lots of new ideas. Some of you will never go to work in an office more than one day a week, if that, for your entire careers. We could incent live workspaces where employers have an ownership stake in a live workspace, and where ultimately they could subsidize the purchase of units. I just met with a developer called Oh Wow, cool name, right? They believe that they can develop units for under $300,000 and the 200,000. We could provide small subsidies for first-time buyers to go into those, and they could begin ownership. We can also encourage a rent-to-own where developers are again incented to create equity, so that ultimately young people and older people, not old, but could actually have enough equity that they could just move seamlessly into that purchase. We don't do anywhere near enough of it. There's a lot of creative ideas. And
Okay. I'm saving you, Ken.
thank you.
Have you all noticed, we've kind of gotten to be friends up here for the most part, because we agree with each other on a lot of stuff. But here's the thing that I want to add to the conversation. The question was about diversity in home ownership. How is it that we don't have diversity in home ownership? It's based on federal housing policy. Redlining from the 1930s to the 1970s contributed $120 billion to underwrite mortgages in the United States to create essentially the middle class, the white middle class. 2% went to African Americans and other people of color. The only way you get out of that kind of situation is good policy, right? It's part of a larger conversation that a lot of people don't want to talk about around reparations. The county passed a measure to actually make an apology to the African American homeowners in Russell City down in Hayward. And it's interesting to me because the one difference between that reparations idea and what the County of Los Angeles did was that in Bruce's Beach and Manhattan Beach, where African Americans through that same time period had lost property, it was valuable property, the county returned that property to those families. Extraordinary. And then the family sold that property back to the County of Los Angeles for $20 million. What did we do in Alameda County? We apologized. What did they do in LA? They actually gave people money. They returned the resource to those people. That's transformative policymaking. We should be trying to do the same thing here in Alameda County. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. You know, it's funny, we talk about, and there's a lot of talk about, hey, we should offer this policy by the county or the cities, or should provide this type of funding. You know, the county already does provide support to first-time home buyers. It's called the AC Boost program, but it's only to county employees. And it's $200,000. It's interest-free. You apply for the funds, you use it for your first home. And then you only have to pay it back if you refinance or when you sell the home. And so there are innovative programs out there, but people don't know about them, or they are incredibly difficult for anybody to really qualify for. And so we need to expand on those programs as one key item at the county level. But the other issue here is we talk a lot about this housing we've built and affordable housing that we've built. Affordable housing that you hear about today, and you've seen the numbers, $800,000, $900,000 a unit. That's not affordable, folks. There's companies like Forma Partners who's buying businesses that are closed in East Oakland, West Oakland, that are going for very low dollars. They're building units in their transitional housing. They'll build 30 units for $500,000. And that is what we have to focus on. We have to go to that creativity of those partners that are in the community, and that's how we solve the housing problem. Thank you.
Hi again. I'd like to say thank you to you all for being here today once again. But for our last few minutes, we want to just ask all of you for your closing remarks. We're going to give you a minute each to say just anything you'd like to conclude with. Thank you.
What I'm interested in having you know in terms of my candidacy is that as someone who has been in this county for over 25 years, an organizer, building relationships with our community, building coalitions, and serving over the past few years on the Oakland City Council, I believe that I have shown the leadership in terms of understanding tough issues, working in a tough environment, and being able to transition into the county, working internally with the different branches of government as well as with our broader community. My values, my goals are around making sure that Alameda County is healthy, safe, and housed. I'm really proud to have a number of endorsements, including from our labor unions, our progressive community, and I'll be staying here a little bit longer so that you can talk with me or my campaign manager one-on-one. Thank you.
So I'm supporting Ben because he reminds me of he's a lot like me. Because people used to say back in the day he works for a living, right? He's married with children. Right? He's an environmental lawyer, so he's already been fighting for the environmental causes that you all are going to have to deal with up close and personal, right? He's done the work in Berkeley to reduce crime, to build affordable housing, to help with the mental health issues. His track record speaks for itself. The mental health finance bonds that he's creating, you haven't seen anything like that in the country. Berkeley's literally leading the nation in this, and it's something in 10, 15 years, hopefully we will see all over the country so that we can reduce the mental health crisis. So I support Ben because I feel like he supports us, and he understands us, he's fighting for us, and he would be here today if he wasn't on the Berkeley City Council right now, pushing forth more powerful legislation. So I want to thank you again on his behalf for your time, for having us, and for allowing me to proxy on his behalf to share his message with you. Thank you.
Mia, Stephen, Eric, Emily, Lucy, Connor, and Rowan, thank you so much for putting this event on and for doing the important work that you're doing as members of not just the debate team, but for your community. You've done a public service for everyone tonight by convening this. I want to thank you first and most importantly for your time. I have been working on behalf of people across our community for many years in nonprofit service for 20 plus years, and for the last 8 years as a member of the city council and as the chair of a number of regional boards. I've had the opportunity to serve us in environmental justice issues, housing issues, transportation equity programs, and social service programs that assist the people who are going to be served by whoever your next county supervisor is. I'm ready to do this work. The East Bay Times endorsed me this morning. I'm proud to be endorsed by 11 of the 14 mayors in this county. They have all worked with me and they know the quality of the product I can provide us. I'm supported by both assembly members who represent this district, as well as many advocates in the housing, transportation, and social services spaces. But most importantly, I want to be supported by you. I'll be around after this evening. You can look up my website is bowdersforsupervisor.com. I want to thank you for your night.
I feel so lucky to be here with you and to be in this space with all of you. I'm so afraid that I would make a mistake if I tried to do what John just did, but believe me, I appreciate you. You know, I've been fortunate to have had a number of honors in my career, but the one that I'm most proud of is that I was the California Mental Health Advocates for Children and Youth Advocate of the Year. And that's an award that's given for people who really step out and take risks to advocate for mental health services for young people. And when you advocate for mental health services for young people, you better be advocating for a lot more than just mental health services. Because in order to keep people healthy, you have to keep their families healthy, you have to keep their communities healthy. And that's what I've done by creating Seneca and growing it from 12 people to 1,700, by intervening when Donald Trump pulled children out of their mother's arms and creating working on a lawsuit that created a settlement that said that I have to stop, and I'm so happy to be with all of you.
I want to thank you all as well, to the Oakland Tech debate team, to all of the folks who hosted this evening. The only thing I would have done differently is like hot chocolate is great, but water. So I will say this, I am not a career politician, though I've been involved in politics. I see myself as a committed community leader. I've worked with nonprofit organizations over the course of my career. I had a stint on the Oakland School Board for 8 years, and then I came back into the community to do the work that I care about. I've been endorsed by everyday people. and leaders in my community who care about my work, people like Angela Blackwell and Arnold Perkins and others. And then the last thing I leave you with is that I have had the banner of hope and healing, because I think we need some hope right now. We need a heavy dose of hope. And Desmond Tutu said, hope is being able to see the light despite the darkness. That's what we need right now. And healing, one definition of healing, a healthy community is a community where everything that should work together works together. I want us to be a community in Alameda County, in Oakland, and Berkeley, and Albany, and Embryville, and Piedmont, the unincorporated areas that actually works together and that we can be hopeful and healthy, not just for our children, but for our elders as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for putting on this great event this evening as well, and great questions. As I started out, I'm not the career politician. I am here. I'm doing this actually for the community, and I see a lot of problems in the community. And the number one issue I've always talked about is public safety. And public safety, I'm endorsed also by the community, as Greg is. I'm also endorsed by Brenda Grisham, who's leading the Recall Pamela Price campaign. She's a true victim, and victims is what I'm supporting in the community. They have been not looked after across the county of Alameda, and it is a serious issue right now. And you also see Gavin Newsom and the AG coming in and saying there's an issue with our district attorney office. So until we fix that problem, and until we fix the law enforcement and we fix the crime issues and crime crisis we have in our community, we're not going to be able to build up the rest of our community to be successful again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to the Oakland Tech debate team. I truly hope that you all stay involved in politics. We need young leaders like you coming up through the ranks. So stick to it. I wanted to share just a little bit more about my background. In my role as a nonprofit leader with the League of Women Voters, I have brought together hundreds of leaders from across the country to work together and collaborate in sharing best practices, sharing knowledge, and sharing resources. And I would like to bring that collaborative skill to the county office to bring together the different areas in our community, all of the nonprofit organizations that are scattered throughout the community doing good work, but going in a million different directions. I would like to use my leadership to aim them all in the same direction and accomplish more together.
Thank you so much. We're so lucky to have such experienced, smart people running for office, and really appreciate your insightful answers. And let's hear it for the Oakland Tech Varsity debate team. Thank you guys so much for writing all the questions, for hosting, for helping to set this up. Thank you, Casey, for the hot chocolate and for bringing us all together tonight. It was your idea, so it's really a really great support from the Richmond Community Planning Council. And I just want to also shout out Youth Beat. It's great to have your support here, and we have a young person behind the camera. And I'm so glad we could bring you together. I understand this is the first time you've been in person all together. There's been many online Zoom debates, but oh, maybe the second one. Okay. Ah, good. Go Wellstone. Thank you, Wellstone. Well, thank you all, and thanks for coming out, and have a good night. Yeah, sure.